Saigon. I am Jackaroo Turu, and on this channel I focus on Australian Aborigines, their languages, cultures, history, and so on. And today I thought I'd ask the question, Xenophobia, did that exist in pre-colonial times in Australia? And the answer to this question is, but of course. Why, of course? Well, because this seems to be a universal human trait. Everywhere, regardless of how big or how small a people group happens to be, the people of that group see themselves as the most normal people on the planet, while others are more or less strange. So, of course, xenophobia existed in pre-colonial Australia. And Norman Tindale, in his monumental 1974 work, he gives some examples of this, things he had heard while doing fieldwork in different places in Australia. And he writes the following: some of their views are probably traditional and have little or no present validity. And I'm sure that was the case in 1974. Nevertheless, these are examples of traditional views of other people groups. So what was it that Aboriginal tribes in Australia disliked and reacted to in other groups that they were in touch with? Well, it was what they looked like, their customs, what they ate. So, the usual things, I would say. So let's look at a few examples, and we'll start with the Nyamal tribe in this area here. The Nyamal tribe traditionally lived on the southern side of the Grey River, and on the other side were desert peoples. Now, I'm not sure if people are aware, but people groups who live in deserts become really tall and thin and have broad noses, while people groups who live in cold climates become short and stocky and have long, thin noses. That last part having to do with the temperature of the air going into the nose. I am not an expert in that area, but anyway, Tindale writes that the Nyamal tribe, people of the Nyamal tribe, were much more stocky than people in the desert groups on the other side of the river. And this is something that the Nyamals noted and reacted to. And they explained and described it in the following way. They compared the desert peoples to red kangaroos and themselves to wallaroos, the hill kangaroos. I don't know if people have encountered a red kangaroo ever. It's a really scary thing to encounter a big male red kangaroo. Let me tell you, I did that once by Lake Moondara, which is outside of Mount Isa in this area here, because male red kangaroos can become 2 meters. So imagine encountering a kangaroo that's taller than yourself. So anyway, Aboriginal tribes all over Australia, they initiate boys and girls into adult life. when they are around 12, 13 years of age. And the way the Nyamal traditionally explained it was that the red kangaroo, when initiated, he got his legs tightly bound, just as Nyamal's neighboring tribes on the coast, Ngarla and Kariera, would tightly bind one of the arms of boys being initiated, and then they would have to go around with the arm bound like that for a few days. So the red kangaroo got initiated by getting his legs bound, tightly bound. That way he got taller and longer legs than the wallaroo, who got initiated in another way, not by getting his legs bound. Yes, in reality though, both the Nyamal tribe and the desert tribes on the other side of the river initiated their boys with circumcision. GeoffreyOGrady showed in a famous BA thesis in anthropology from the University of Sydney in 1959, a famous thesis among us Australianists anyway. He showed that circumcision as a rite of passage, an initiation rite into adulthood, was invented at some point in the central parts of Australia and then spread outwards in all directions. However, when the British came and started to colonize, this rite had not penetrated all of Australia, so non-circumcising tribes were found along the coasts. Yes, the people of the Great Western Desert here, they called themselves Martu or Wati, words that both mean man, because they saw themselves as real men since they circumcised their boys. That made them into real men. Non-circumcising peoples along the coast were called Minma, woman. Obviously, this is something that was disliked by the Nyungar peoples in southwesternmost Australia. They disliked being called women and started to call themselves this, which means man. The Noongar peoples are a group of peoples that speak related dialects of one and the same language. And interesting to note in this context is that the Nyamal tribe, they said that the desert peoples were cannibals. And as also noted by Tindale, the Ballardong, one of the Nyungar groups living in the York district east of Perth, they also said that the desert peoples were cannibals. This is something I find fascinating. It seems to me that many people groups around the world, until recently at least, have called neighbors cannibals or accused neighbors of cannibalism. Real cannibals seem to be very few and far between, though. Yes, anyway, there is a lot that could be said about circumcision, but I think probably YouTube doesn't like that topic, so I won't talk more about that here and now. Also, Tindale writes about other really rude opinions that the Nyamal tribe had about the desert groups. And I won't mention those here more either. Anyway, when it comes to food, let's move on to food instead. We have the Pitjantjatjara group, one of the desert groups here in that traditionally lived in the Great Victoria Desert, and the other desert, which was called, what was that called? Gibson. The Great Victoria and Gibson. They disliked the grass seed eating habits of their neighbors. And the fact is that in big parts of the Western Desert, milled grass grain was called gunagandi, where guna is dung and gandhi vegetable food. And this was contrasted with goga, meat, which real people ate, in the opinion of these desert groups. Speaking of goga, another Western Desert group, this one in South Australia, was called Kokatha. And they did a play on words here. They said that the name of their tribe meant meat eaters. That is not what it meant originally, but that is what they would claim. So goga, meat, and ta, tooth. And what they said is that that meant meat eaters. In contrast to grass seed eaters then, of course. Well, these were a few examples of xenophobia in pre-colonial Australia, opinions that different tribes had about neighboring groups. This will be all for today, but I will be back, so see you later.